Hey everyone, this is the Black Manga Critic here with another video for the channel. Now today, of course, is Manga Monday, so I had to do it real good for you guys. I've got some amazing, interesting, introspective things to say about my feelings about Attack on Titan. And just before we get into like the review and analysis and all the in-depth stuff that we're going to get into, I just want to say that before even embarking on this analysis and review, I had never read Attack on Titan. I had never watched any really. I mean, I watched the first episode, but outside of that, I never and even that I kind of sort of skimmed through because I just wasn't generally interested in it. But outside of that experience, I had never really gone into even thinking about Attack on Titan, let alone reading the entire manga series or watching the anime or anything like that. So I still haven't watched the anime because I'm really very much so a manga reader at heart. I don't usually watch an anime unless it's been really, really hyped, if it seems very interesting to me to the point where I don't necessarily want to read the manga first. I want to see something animated, like Welcome to the Ballroom or something like that. So basically, in a general sense, I really like Attack. I really like the manga. I really liked reading it. I will say that also to preface that the first kind of I want to say 15 or so chapters, I was kind of man, what's the big deal? The series kind of sucks. It wasn't particularly good. I wasn't really interested in the characters outside of Eren, right? Or Eden, however you pronounce it, because he just seemed like an annoying kind of kid. I understood the trauma and everything like that he faced because his mother was eaten by a titan, and that was okay. But outside of that, and I didn't really care about Mikasa at that point. That stuff didn't really matter to me. I wasn't invested in Paradise Island. I wasn't invested in their town and their space or anything like that. All the characters just seemed kind of boring. They just kind of it was okay, we're introduced to this character, now we're introduced to that character, but they were just kind of boring to me. So after that, after it picked up, after sort of the introduction of Annie and that sort of story, that's when it really picked up for me. That's when I was man, this shit is pretty good. I guessed that Annie was going to be the female Titan, but pretty quickly, just because of how she looked as the female Titan and how sort of and the way that she fought and things like that. But generally, I thought it was a great storyline. I thought it was really interesting. I think that certain characters like Armin were really established in that sense. So once it got to that point, I was all right, I'm all in. I'm gonna keep reading this manga. I'm gonna see where it goes. So in a general sense, I'm gonna for this video, I'm gonna be talking about just things that I really liked and I think were well done by Isayama. And the things that I thought were kind of where I thought he kind of dropped the ball. Where I was okay, I don't understand why we're talking about this thing or why we're introducing this concept right now, and blah blah blah. So that's where I'm going to kind of go into it in terms of this video. So in terms of the positives in terms of Attack on Titan, and this is just the manga. We're just talking about the manga. We're not talking about the anime, which I know that everyone probably likes way more than the manga for various reasons. But I'm going to be strictly talking about the manga because I haven't watched the anime yet. I probably will end up watching it at some point, and I may make another video about how I felt about the anime. See both seasons 1 and 2. So for now, we're just going to stick to the manga. But in terms of the positives, in terms of, related to the manga, I really, really appreciated what Isayama did with characters. Most of the time, when you get into a battle shonen manga, character development often isn't necessarily on the minds of the mangaka in the way that it should be on their minds, right? If you look at something like Naruto or Bleach, I'm thinking of other, like, I'm trying to think of other, like, manga that are just like, just like the character development is like trash. It's not very good. Like that, like you see that, and like there aren't too many battle shonen manga that really nail the character development and really nail a sort of like introspection into like these characters that they're writing, and like Isayama does a great job at that. And just to sort of give you like two sort of like character relationships as an example as to how Isayama does that, like I think beautifully. The first relationship that I'm going to be talking about is Reiner and Bertolt, and this is like just top level like character development, relationship to the story, relationship to the narrative, the plot, things like that. All of these things are working in like seamlessly, and I would say that like once it really gets to that point where where it's revealed that Reiner and Bertolt are the Armored Titan and the Colossal Titan respectively, that's when I'm like, oh man, this manga is really good. Like this manga is doing some awesome things with characters and with the development and all of those things. So the thing that I loved about both of them, like, and I guess I'm gonna start with Reiner. But the thing that I love about Reiner, just solely as a character, is just how much like Isayama portrays like his character and as the Armored Titan and as a person, right? So as a person, Reiner is like a double or maybe even a triple agent. I think like in some ways, right? Because like as a double agent, right? Like he's clearly working for the service corps, right? And at some level, like he genuinely cares about the people that he's like grown to know and love, like Eren and Misaka, Armin, all these characters. But he's also working for the Marleys, right? Like he's also working for these people who want to crush like this island and who want to retake the founding Titans' power, right? So on one sense, like he's working to it, like in one sense, like he's working to sort of even just sort of attempt to protect his relationships with the service corps, and he's really sort of struggling and grappling with that. And in the other sense, like he's like a Marlin, like to the death, and like in a lot of ways, right? Like he wants to protect this place. He wants to do his duty as the Armored Titan, right? And in that sense, as the Armored Titan, Reiner is all about protecting. He's all about protecting people, right? Even in the latest sort of like Marley arc, like he's all about protecting. I can't remember the sort of like girl's name right now, but he's all about protecting her. And he's talking with what's his name, Falco, so that Falco can take his Armored Titan power, right? Like so he's like there's just layers to Reiner's role as a protector, right? As someone who acts as an armor for these establishment, as someone who acts as an armor, right, for the walled civilization, and as someone who acts as an armor for the Marleys, right? Like, and as someone who acts as an armor for these children who are generally like being brainwashed by the Marleys, right? So there's a lot of levels like to Reiner's character, and how Isayama uses his ability as an Armored Titan to reflect his character. So I thought that was like that's been handled beautifully. I really appreciate Reiner as a character. And if we go to Bertolt, right? And we're still just strictly talking about Bertolt as a character. Like he's also like another like brilliantly sort of worked out character because when the first time we're really introduced to like him, we see the colossal. We were introduced to him as a Colossal Titan, right? We don't necessarily know that Bertolt exists at all or anything like that, but we see him as a Colossal Titan, as someone who is like very intimidating, really intense, brings destruction in his wake. And so we're thinking that like later on, once we understand that Titans are actually people, right? We're thinking that like the Colossal Titans the person is going to be like a really intense individual, larger than life, kind of maybe pretty aggressive, things of that nature, right? But Bertolt isn't anything like that. Like on the surface, and even sort of deep inside, like he's not really like an aggressive person in that sense, like unless he needs to be, right? So in that way, like Isayama does a really great, symbolic sort of representation of Bertolt as the Colossal Titan, right? As someone who has to sort of act as a larger than life, figure when the chips are down, right? Because like when the chips are down, like and Reiner is like taken out in sort of like the second attack, the third attack I want to say on the wall, right? I said wall rose, right? Like that shit is really intense. Like Broto, like comes at everybody. Like he's really like trying to make sure that like Reiner's alive, that the plan that the Beast Titans plan ultimately succeeds, right? Like he's putting in the work, but outside of that, like most of the time, Boto is like like he'll tell you like I'm not really trying to make sort of big waves necessarily. I just want to like stay in my lane and do my role and help others when I can. And that's like totally like opposite to like the Colossal Titan, who's just like a sort of symbol of like ridiculous power and asserting that and the assertion of that power. And so I think Isayama does a great job at that. The other sort of and if we think about both the relationships, right? We see that Reiner is consistently trying to protect Bertolt, right? Right, in one instance, right, like Bertolt can't transform. But this is like when, like, I want to say the first time that the second time that Eren is kidnapped, right? Because the first time that Eren is kidnapped is with Annie, right? But the second time that Eren is kidnapped, right, when Reiner and Bertolt come in, that's like like shit's intense, right? And like it takes like everything that the Service Corps has to just like defeat like both of them at like at the same time. And Reiner is just like he's working like overtime, right? He's working overtime to make sure that not only does he protect himself, but he protects Bertolt, who is holding on to Eren. So like there's a lot like at play there. In terms of like Reiner working to protect Bertolt and Bertolt as sort of like the submissive in that relationship at that point, but generally as a submissive throughout like most of the narrative, right? Like at this point he's dead, right? We know he's dead. He doesn't really have any bearing. Maybe he does. He will have some bearing in terms of Armin sort of receiving his memories as the Colossal Titan, right? So maybe he'll have some bearing in that, but in a general sense, like Bertolt is consistently the submissive individual in Reiner and Bertolt's relationship, right? So I think Isayama does a really great job of sort of showing that like relationships are complicated because Reiner and Bertolt aren't sort of always like that. Like when the chips are down, Bertolt's the one that takes charge, right? So I think Isayama does a great job of saying, hey, like these characters are complex, and because of that, their relationship has to not necessarily be equally as complex, but it has to be complex. Period. Right. So I think those two characters are some of my favorites, and their dynamic, and their relationship to other characters is awesome. So I really love that. If we're thinking about Ymir and Historia, there are two other characters whose dynamics I love. Like I love the dynamic between them. I love just them as characters. Like it. There's a way. Like I'm going to talk about sort of like the sort of arc where their team is out and looking at I want to say a town sort of like the plan to sort of recapture I believe the Maria sort of like space or whatever. But like there's a point where you're just like you're just invested in Ymir as a character, right? Like you're invested in Ymir as a character. You're invested in Historia as a character, right? Historia as Krista, right? Like even as Krista, like you're invested in her because like it's clear that like their dynamic is so strong and their relationship and their bond is so strong that like even if Ymir doesn't end up being being like one of the 9 Titans, right? And Krista doesn't end up being Historia, who is part of the Reese family, who is like the royal family, right? And the only people that can use the Founding Titans' power, right? Like even without that information, Ymir and Historia's relationship is like awesome, and for 2 reasons, right? Like for one, the fact that like they reflect one another, right? Like they understand each other in the sense like they both have had like pretty like rough like upbringings in a general sense, right? Like both of them have been ostracized by the communities that they came from, Even though both of them were sort of seen to be pretty important to the communities that they came from, right? So, right, like at one point, both of them were sort of like worshipped as, right, like individuals who held a particular sort of like power and cachet and things like that. And then that all fell to shit, right, for both of them. And right, like, and then they meet each other, and then they support each other, and it's a really great like growth in their relationship, right? And I think the second thing that and so like, right, well, so they see that in each other, and they're like really like devoted to one another, and I love that devotion. Like you feel that like devotion. And I think the second thing that I love about it is that, right, like Ymir is a woman, right, and Historia is a woman, and if you're looking at like battle shonen, like those relationships that aren't particularly like heteronormative, like you don't really see that like in battle shonen. Maybe you see that in like some like general sort of shonen, maybe like slice of life or something like that. But in battle shonen, everything is like intensely like heteronormative in terms of how in terms of like opposite sex relationships, like in a very like general like male female sort of like notion, right? Like male female like notions of like sex and gender and things like that. But like they clearly are in love with one another. I mean, I think some people might be like, oh, Historia, loved the Ymir as like as a sister or something like that or whatever. I'm like, no, like Historia loved Ymir. Ymir loved Historia as like romantically, and like that's why it's so devastating when Ymir ends up when Ymir dies, right? When Ymir chooses to go to the Marley Empire, right? That's why it's so devastating, because that like once like Ymir is like already gone over there, and like Ymir's been like the Titan for like quite a long time. Like we already know that like they're probably going to like turn someone into a Titan, kill Ymir, and then like feed her to someone else so that they can gain that power. It's just really sad, and like Historia gets that letter from Ymir, and that's also like devastating, because like, man, Ymir's gone, right? Ymir ain't coming back. So I think like in terms of that dynamic, in terms of the way that like their bond is shown and the intensity of that bond comes through the manga, and probably more so in the anime, but like in the manga it really comes through. And I think that like just the fact that they aren't really like a heteronormative like couple in that sense, right? Like they're clearly in love with one another, with each other. And Isayama isn't sort of like really trying to sort of say that, oh, like, that is a bad thing. I appreciate that in a battle shonen manga. I also really like sort of like some of the backstories of other characters that really, make you like genuinely like care about them, like Sasha, Hang, I believe is how you pronounce it. I'm not sure, or Hang. That might be like the German pronunciation. But characters like those are just like, at first I'm like, oh man, Sasha's just like a goofy character, and we're not necessarily supposed to take her seriously because she's eating potatoes, while she's training. But then we sort of understand that like how like that she like clearly she loves food, because like there was a point where like and like there was a point where food was scarce and she couldn't really get her hands on it. And then there's also another point where food is scarce because while Maria was invaded, so they had to move even further into the walled community. So like Sasha's backstory is really great. Hang is really cool because like she's a character that's like constantly going through instances where she has to make moral like decisions, right? Where she has to like sort of like look at her own morality and be like, oh, like should I be doing these things? And if I do, like at what price do I like commit these like sort of acts where I'm like experimenting with Titans? Like once she figures out that like Titans are actually people, right? She's like, oh man, like they're like, now she has like a moral dilemma where she has to say like, should I continue to do these experiments? If so, like, how do I like grapple with that for the sake of the walled community, things like that. So I thought that was like even like little things like that are really, really well done and handled by Isayama. I guess like in terms of like characters like right, like Levi, Misaka, Kenny, like the Ackermans, like Kenny Ackerman, like that's also handled really well because like at first you're just like, okay, Levy's kind of a like Levy seems to be a badass character, just because like he's clearly the strongest soldier. Mikasa is also sort of a badass character because she's like one of the strongest soldiers, right? And Kenny's like a badass because he's strong, right? And then we sort of later on realize that they're strong because of the because they're sort of superpowered in a sense. But I'm going to talk about a little bit about that later because that's something that I kind of disliked. But in terms of like their character development and things like that, I thought they were handled really well as well. Like we find out that Levi, his upbringing is also like equally rough to like some of the other characters, if not more so. Misaka's upbringing is really, really intense, right? And Kenny Ackerman's not necessarily his upbringing, but just like his story, like as he's working as sort of like a spy and an assassin and all those things for the royal family, and like that's like also like really well done. It adds character. It adds more interesting tangents to like the story, and I really like that. I really appreciated that. So in terms of characters, I think I'm gonna like. I'm not necessarily going to talk about Eren or anything like that because like this video could be like ridiculously long if I talk about Eren and the other characters. But generally, I like Eren later on. I don't like Eren at the beginning because I think like he's just like as a character he just seems kind of like too focused on rage in a sort of Sasuke way that I dislike. And in that way, like you don't see too much development. But once like he receives a Titan and once like he really starts to interact with all these other characters in the service course, that's when you really start to see, like, oh, like Eren has some depth and he has some real like emotion, like an emotional range and things of that nature. So I like that. Armin's another great character. At first he's kind of annoying, but eventually like you really start to see his value as both as like a tactician and just as a character, right? Like who develops. So I really like that. I really appreciated that. So I guess something that I also want to get into, this is gonna be the second thing that I get into in terms of the things that I liked. I just generally liked the story. I like the way that like the plot progresses generally. The like certain narrative points like are really great, and I think like one way in which like the story sort of progresses really really well is like in the way that it sort of says, you know what. The way that the story has gone, like this is like for one point, like there's a lot of action, and then at another point, like it's like, okay, we're gonna like have this sort of like pocket narrative that's going on within like a larger, like really important narrative, right? So like I talked about Ymir and Historia quite a bit, and the reason why I like characters, but I think like in terms of like that, like that's why like the story sort of works, right? Like because like there are like Isayama allows himself, right, and like Shonen Jump and Weekly Shonen Jump allows him like right to like say, okay, like slow it down, slow the story down, slow the plot progression down. Let's just take some time with these two characters and really develop them, so that when we get back into the main sort of story arc and everything that's going on, like we have more of an appreciation for them, their interaction with other characters, and just the story as a whole. So like stuff like that is really really important. You know what I mean? Like let's say like when Bertolt, Reiner, Ymir, and Eren and Eren are traveling through right like the foresty area right and everything like that. Like that's just great because like the story at that point slows down a bit, right? Like before the surface corps come to rescue Eren and Ymir, but at that point, like right, we get another instance where like Isayama slows the story down. We get some backstory, we get some interesting character development, and that's what we need. Like, and I don't care what anybody says. Like, some people might say like, "Oh, Battle Shonen, you shouldn't expect character development. You shouldn't expect character progression. You shouldn't, well, not character progression, but yeah, you shouldn't expect character development. You shouldn't expect really complex things like narratives and things like that." And it's like, but why not? You know what I mean? Like, Hunter x Hunter does it. Other Yu Yu Hakusho did it. Boku no Hero does it. You know what I mean? Like the list, like the list is growing. You know what I mean? It's like manga are realizing that like you can't just like throw out like trash anymore unless you're like a national treasure like Akira Toriyama. or Ichiro Oda. You know what I mean? Like, and Oda doesn't throw out trash necessarily, right? Like, I'm like or Toriyama like necessarily, right? We're just saying that like you can have complex narratives and slow the story down so that we can get complex like character development. You know what I mean? So I appreciate that in terms of like what Isayama is doing, right? Like he does that and he's done it in many instances. Even now, in terms of the Marley arc, like that's a place where like he's like really like halted the story of the main characters, right, of the protagonists, so that he can tell this story because we need this story. We need the story over here, right? Like yeah, we've had way more than enough time with the other characters in the world community, right? And now that we've sort of gotten out of the world community, like we need this other narrative, we need this other plot progression, right? Because if we don't have that, then the war that the world community is going to wage against Marley like wouldn't be impactful, right? Like it wouldn't be as impactful, right? Like we need to know what's going on over here. We need to know what's going on over in Marley. That way, the story is better, the plot progression is better, the narratives are better, and the character interactions are better, right? Like, if you think about the Fourth Ninja War, like, that shit was garbage because, like, there wasn't really, enough character development in the story for all of these, sort of separate battles to matter. Like, Kishimoto just needed to go through that Fourth Ninja War as quickly as possible because he didn't have any character development. He didn't have enough character development earlier in Naruto Shippuden, right? So Isayama is not going to isn't making that same mistake. He's saying like, okay, we need to slow the pace down. So I really like that in terms of like the way that like the story is constructed in a way that's like, okay, we can slow down and we can get that character development that we need and we can get that complexity that we need. So the third thing that I liked, the third thing that I liked is the art. Like, and I'll just generally say that, like, yeah, there are definitely moments where like the art is like clearly like sloppy, not necessarily like Tagashi-esque because like Tagashi, like man, like when he's just like when his back's hurting, like that art is not very like pretty to look at, and that's fine. Like once I sort of realized that was the case, I understood that. I was like, all right, whatever, the art's gonna be what it's gonna be. But Isayama, it's like, you clearly at the beginning it was like, he had to, he might not have had as many assistants or whatever the case may have been, or whatever. But like clearly, like the art the art takes a jump in like later chapters, right? And once that happens, it's like, man, like the story's like definitely like a bit better. Not that the story's a bit better, but that like I appreciate the story a bit more because like now I'm getting like a great visual storytelling with the with the written storytelling. So the art, like there are certain points like when we see the Colossal Titan, the first appearance, like that's like a really brilliant splash panel. We see trying to think of other instances, right? Like certain Titan transformations, like that's always like really well done. The Titan battles are really well drawn, like they're very dynamic, right? Like when Eren or someone else throws a punch, like you feel that, right? Like you feel it through the page, right? When like Eren and Annie are fighting, you feel that battle through the page. It's really well done. And I think like even just like the way the walls are are drawn, like really just like impeccable like artwork, right? Like you feel just how tall the walls are, like just how high up they are. So when the characters are like standing on top of the wall, like as they're surveying like certain areas, man, like you really feel that. You're like, damn, like they're really high up. Oh shit. Like you really, and I appreciate that sort of art. Like I appreciate that, because like, some manga could just be like, okay, like I'm going to draw this like massive thing and like not worry about like the, like little details and stuff like that. But like, if you're going to sort of do like any sort of manga art, especially with a narrative where like size is an important dynamic in terms of the art, like you got to sort of nail that every time. And Isayama nails that every time. Like I never feel like, I can't really follow like not necessarily the battles, but I can't follow like the way they're like traversing through the forest or something like that. Like the landscape, like when the way that Titan battles are drawn, the way that landscapes are drawn. I can always sort of follow characters moving through those landscapes, and I can always follow the Titan battles. But I will say that like I'm gonna mention the dislikes in terms of the art because like there are some times where like the art kind of gets a little fuzzy. So I'm gonna leave that for the dislikes. But in terms of the likes, like characters, the way the story is like uh, written and formatted, and the art, those three things, I think for the most part are pretty well done. And so far, I'm still like enjoying the story. So I will say, so we're moving into the dislikes, and this isn't going to be like a particularly long part of the video, but I will say that like there were definitely like two or three things that like really sort of turned me off in terms of wanting to continue the series, and just like my just overall like enjoyment of like while reading it. You know what I mean? So the first thing I want to say that I genuinely like really like disliked, where I was like, man, like this shit sucks, like was just like the pacing at the beginning. Like the pacing was like it wasn't even so much that the pacing was garbage, so much as it was just like that like yeah the pacing was garbage because like there were just certain things that like were introduced a little bit too fast. Like I was just like, we didn't spend enough time with either we didn't spend enough time with Misaka and her and developing her character. Or Armin and developing his character, or anything like that. Like it was just like sometimes the backstories were just a little too like quick. Like, and while I understand that like Isayama was really trying to sort of be as impactful as possible within a condensed space, like it wasn't impactful enough. Like in those first like sort of like 15 or 16 chapters or whatever. So that was kind of like one thing that I just generally like disliked. I think like if I'm gonna suggest this manga to someone else, like I have to say like, you just gotta pull through, man. You just gotta pull through those first like 15 chapters or whatever, and then eventually it gets really, really good. Even the first like 20 chapters or whatever, like, and then eventually it gets really, really good. Like I don't want to have to say that like about like something that I suggest to someone else. Like if I suggest like a book to someone, I don't want to say like you just gotta pull through those like first like 10 chapters and then it gets really good. Like that's stupid. You know what I mean? Like nobody's gonna like sit through 10 chapters of a book. And then say like, oh, you know what? I'm gonna keep reading. Like that doesn't make any sense. So I don't want to have to do that whenever I'm suggesting a work that I think someone should read. And I think that like a lot of manga now are really getting into the habit of saying like we need to like ramp up, especially battle shonen, right? Like this sort of thing. Like, we gotta ramp up these like narratives and these stories like as quickly as possible, so that you can keep an audience, because like people people would drop a manga after like chapter like 3. You know what I mean? So you got to step it up from the jump. So that was one thing that I generally like disliked, and I had a hard time with the manga because people were like, oh, you should read Attack on Titan, and I was like, oh, I don't want to read Attack on Titan. Like it just seemed kind of whatever and generic and blah blah blah. And then like for the first few like 15 chapters, it seemed like that. It seemed like it was like, yeah, there were massive titans, but it seemed very generic, and I didn't like that. So I am glad that I hung on to it because like it is very good. But yeah, I guess the second thing that I generally disliked about like that I will dislike right about Attack on Titan is the way that Isayama just sort of like introduces like kind of ridiculous creation sort of like story in terms of like the Titans, right? Like I really wanted it to be particularly scientific. I wanted it to sort of say like, okay, like humans did these experiments, and these experiments went awry and blah blah. You know what I mean? Even if it was like it could have just had that framework, right? And Isayama, I think, would have really ran with it, and it would have been complex and interesting. But he didn't do that. He sort of copped out, and maybe he felt like he couldn't explain the Titans away in a scientific way or whatever. But I think he just kind of copped out. Like I just generally dislike that. Oh, some evil like demon-y kind of creature gave this human like the power to like use to become a Titan or whatever, and then that person like split like this Titan into like 9 abilities or whatever. It's just stupid. It's just like I just generally dislike that. Like it doesn't add any like real complexity to the story, because the story is like complex enough in terms of like the way that like there's factions amongst like the people of the world or whatever, and all those things like right amongst like at least like the Eldians and the Marlies, right? Like the Marlies, right? Like, so I understand like that. Like that's fine. Like if it was just that and the science was involved, I've been all for it. I would have kept on reading. I would have been hyped. Right? But now I'm just like, this is stupid. You know, the idea that like there are like paths among the Titans or whatever. That's just like, it's like, you gotta explain that at some point, man. Like you can't just throw out like, oh, there are paths and these paths allow you know, the founding Titan to control other Titans. Like this shit, that's like on some like Naruto level like bullshit. You know what I mean? I don't want any more Naruto level bullshit. I'm done with Naruto. Naruto is finished, right? At least in my eyes. I'm not even touching Boruto. Like I don't pay attention to that like piece of garbage ever. You know, so I don't want to see like a you know, cockamamie creation story introduced into a manga that like up until that point had been very, very good. So you know, that really pissed me off, and it's still kind of pissing me off. And I hope that at some point Isayama explains those things away in a way that I'm happy with, and I think that readers, other readers that also have a gripe about that, are can be happy with. I will say that the third gripe that I have with the story is just like, I don't know if it was always a monthly manga. I feel like it didn't. I don't think it started as a monthly manga. I think like it started as a weekly, and then Isayama probably figured that like, okay, like if I'm going to tell this story, like it needs to be monthly. So that switch to monthly is like, I think in some ways like it's good for him because like it gives him the time that's needed to like to draw and to tell the story and to flesh things out, right? And to have those pockets that I was talking about earlier of character development, right? But I do think that like, you know, at certain points, like if you're going to sort of switch off to like another narrative completely, like in terms of like where we are now with like sort of the Marley arc, like dude, like this shit's got to be weekly. Like you cannot like just like shift off to the protagonist and then tell people that like every month I'm not going to be talking about the protagonist. Like that's kind of dumb. You know what I mean? You kind of dropped the ball there, man. You kind of dropped the ball there, Isayama, and you kind of dropped the ball there, Weekly Shonen Jump. It's like, so I'm not saying fix it because like at this point you like the monthly, you know, coming out monthly is working for him generally. So I'm not gonna like be like, as like the one disgruntled fan, you know, make your manga come out weekly instead of monthly. I'm not gonna do that. But I do think that like because it comes out monthly, you know, you run the risk of, right, and not just a risk, but like you have had, you know, fans complain that like they want to see Misaka, they want to see Eren, they want to see Armin, they want to see Levi, they want to see who else? You know, the commander, Zackley. They want to see Sasha. They want to see these characters. You know what I mean? So yeah, like, you know, at some point gotta get back to the main characters, and I think that's coming soon. That's why like it's like, you know, it's annoying, but like I won't say that like I'm gonna stop reading because of it, because I do think that like Isayama understands that, and that you know, at some point soon we're gonna get back to the narrative of like the protagonist and their preparations for the war that's coming, because you know there's a war coming. It's gonna be big. It's gonna be between Titans. It's gonna be really, really cool, and I am looking forward to it. So that's all I really wanted to say in terms of how it felt about Attack on Titan, how as a series, and you know I'm gonna keep on reading it because I do think that like there are some like shortcomings to it, but I think most, like, you know, if not all manga have like shortcomings. You know what I mean? So I'm not gonna like stop reading it because like some of those shortcomings were kind of annoying, but I'm not gonna stop completely because of them. I do think that like, you know, there are other manga that I would do that with, but hey. You guys are still reading it. You guys are still interested in it. I'm interested in it. Let's talk about it, you know? So what I'm going to do is eventually, like, you know, Attack on Titan is going to be one of the series that I talk about on my Facebook page. So just so you know, if you haven't seen the video that I mentioned, where I mentioned like all the new things that I'm sort of like trying to do and my developments and things of that nature on the channel, I've started a Facebook page. It's gonna be cool. We're gonna that's gonna be one of the places where we're gonna really have like conversation, you know, like really in depth conversation. You know what I mean? Like it's not gonna be like, oh, rando comment on YouTube that I might not see, you know, because like there might be so many comments like at a later date when the channel does grow, right? But I really want those conversations to happen. I want to hear from you all. Like I want to hear what you think. Always want to hear what you think. So, before I sign out, like, comment, and subscribe. Like, you know, if you guys don't support this channel, then it's going to be really hard for me to hear from you because you're not supporting the channel, you're not, leaving comments and things like that. And it's harder to hear about notifications if you're not subscribed. So that's the main thing. You know what I mean? So this is the Black Manga Critic. Wishing you all a very happy Manga Monday, and I'm out.